It's safe to say this has been a seriously explosive year for paddles. While not every paddle that came out was awesome by any means, there were so many good paddles that it was too hard to cut my overall best of list down to 5, so I've decided to expand that list to my top 10 paddles of 2024. This is going to be the down and dirty, get to the point list, so let's get right into it. Starting off our list at number 10 is the Chorus Fire EX. The power-oriented fire series jumped into the scene hot, pun intended, with the standard-shaped SX, the hybrid-shaped HX, and the elongated-shaped EX, all coming in at $153 after discount codes. What made the EX stand out so much to me was that for an elongated shaped paddle, it was very light in the hands, had a very low swing weight, and at 14 millimeters thick, it packs a serious punch both in terms of pop and drive speed power. This is in my overall top 2 or 3 in terms of power paddles, and I think this would be a great paddle for people who like strong pop, a consistent feel off the face, and like paddles with a lower dwell time coming from a more stiff feeling face. Next on our list at number 9 is the Engage Pursuit V2.0. I feel like this is easily the most underrated paddle of 2024, which comes in at just $144 after the code 20Dustin, and that includes Engage's 30-day no questions asked return policy and their lifetime warranty. The V2.0 is Engage's first hybrid-shaped paddle, and it's basically a lighter, more maneuverable version of the Pursuit Pro 1 6.0, and it comes in also $60 cheaper. Like the Paddletek TKO and ESQs and the Vatic Pro Saga, the V2.0 is not thermoformed, which allows it to maintain a more plush feel and still carries a good level of pop, characteristic of the other Engage Pursuit paddles. In my opinion, this is Engage's best paddle and would make a good paddle for people who want a more plush feel with an all-court level pop and power and don't want to mess with the durability concerns of Gen 3 or even Gen 2 paddles. At the number 8 position is 11624's Monarch Jelly Bean. The Jelly Bean got my overall pick for the top 5 paddles under $100, coming in at either $90 to $99 after discount codes, depending on color selection. It also took the top spot on my top 5 paddles for beginners list, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's strong enough to play at the advanced levels, because I assure you that it is. It comes in a very unique wide body shape that boasts an ultra high twist weight and sweet spot size, and the handle length and face shape give you the perception you're playing with a paddle that's longer than it actually is. It's worth noting that soon the Monarch Jelly Bean will be renamed the Pegasus Jelly Bean, Pegasus being the wide body shape designation and Jelly Bean being the construction designation. Nothing about how the paddle is layered or constructed will change, but just know if you're going to go looking for this paddle in the future, you're going to want to look for the new name. This would be a great paddle for people who want a more control-leaning paddle with a giant sweet spot, high maneuverability, and a softer feel, and for anyone looking for a top budget paddle. Number 7 on our list is the Paddletek ESQ-C. This is going to be the best power paddle in the wide body shape on the market right now, coming in 2 thicknesses, the more poppy 12.7mm version and the slightly less poppy but more stable 14.3mm version. These paddles have a great plush feel, very high spin ratings, and a very high maneuverability rating, all while being Gen 1 non-thermal form paddles with a lifetime warranty, protecting you from the unlikely event of core crushing or delamination. There are basically 2 reasons why these paddles aren't a little higher on my list, the first of which is the thicker handle circumference, which does turn some people away. And the second is price, as Paddletek doesn't offer any direct discount codes anymore, and these paddles come in at a total of $250. These are still very solid paddles, however, and you can take 10% off of the price of these paddles if you order with the PBMED discount code through Pickleball Drop Shop or Pickle Madness. Making a surprise last-minute entrance at the number 6 spot is the Bread and Butter Invader. I was hesitant to put a newly released paddle this high on the list, but ultimately I just have to be honest, and I think this paddle is that good, and it's clearly Bread and Butter's best paddle. It comes in at a price of $170 after the PBMED discount code, and I think it's worth that price. The Invader is a overall hybrid shape with a polyester, formerly known as titanium, face, with a fiberglass layer that gives it a little extra pop. It feels plush on initial contact, but as the ball sinks in and gets to that fiberglass layer, it recoils for a very nice but not over-the-top pop response. The pop and spin are certainly the standout factors here, and I agree with Lewis's take from Pickleball Pursuit when he said that these are basically a more poppy version of the J2Ti. This would be a great paddle for people who want an all-court paddle with that nice plush titanium polyester feel and a little extra pop, and for those who don't mind supporting our alien enemies in their takeover of our planet. At number 5 on our list is the 16mm Joola Perseus 3S. This is my top choice for elongated power paddles for the right people and with a good understanding of the inherent risks, but I'll get to that in a second. These also list for $280 new, which is a pretty penny, but you can take 10% off the price of these paddles if you order with the PBMED discount code through Pickleball Drop Shop or Pickle Madness. For elongated paddles, these are very light feeling, to the point that they even make most Gen 2 and Gen 1 paddles feel heavy. These have the classic exponential power to effort correlation pattern, and they have a distinct hollow sound when hitting the ball, typical of that of Gen 3 paddles. These paddles have a 2-layered foam ring perimeter, giving it a powerful diving board type feel when hitting the ball hard, particularly out towards the end of the paddle. If you really want to compete with the hard hitters of the game while maintaining good spin levels, this is going to be your paddle. I prefer the 16mm versions of the Joola 3S since the dwell time and recoil are stronger in these models, and the sweet spot on the 14mm Perseus 3S is just a little too small for most people, in my opinion, while the sweet spot on the 16S is still a little smaller than average, but is improved adequately with a bit of lead tape. These days, I never ever recommend the Joola Mod TA15 to players since they break so incredibly fast, and the 3S is what I recommend instead. I think players should understand though that Gen 3 paddles that use EVA foam in the perimeters and the core do seem to carry a higher risk of core crushing than other paddles do, and these have just a 6-month warranty. I think these paddles are best suited for more advanced level players who can handle a good strong level of pop and want a lighter feeling elongated power paddle, or for those players who struggle to generate power on their own and want the paddle to do the work for them. If you don't want to deal with the risks of Gen 3 constructed paddles and you want a more friendly price, I would direct you to the Chorus Fire EX for an elongated power paddle with high levels of pop, spin, and great cosmetics. In the number 4 spot on this list is Pickleball Apes Pulse V. This paddle has been my go-to paddle since its release, but this list isn't just about me, so with that in mind, the Pulse V lands at number 4. The Pulse V comes in at $180 after the PBMED discount code, which I obviously think is worth it, but if you do decide to get one and you don't like it, Pickleball Apes is continuing forward their 30-day like it or return it policy, even after the paddle has been opened and played with. This wide body paddle has the biggest sweet spot and highest level of stability of any paddle that I have ever tested, and is also the single best paddle that I've ever used for vibration dampening. It sports an industry first nylon infused purple dyed aramid fiber weave, and it actually has a 3-layered foam ring around the perimeter with the outer tube fully enclosed in a carbon fiber tubule and a C-shaped inner tubule, which explains why it's so good at vibration dampening and control, though I would put it in the all-court category due to its ability to still generate good power on higher effort swings. There are really 2 main reasons why the Pulse V isn't higher on the list for me, and they both relate to the break-in period. After dissecting open my Pulse V, which we showed on the first PBMED podcast that Cody and I did, and after discussing it with Mr. John Q, it seems pretty apparent that the break-in that occurs is either from the outer ring breaking open, resulting in a sudden change and increase in power that most people actually find to be very pleasant, or that the outer ring came from the factory not fully closed, like it seems John's may have. After the break-in period, it seems like the changes to the Pulse V stop and that the power levels seem to level off and stay there with little to no evidence of core crushing. And this sort of leads me to the second reason why this paddle's not higher on this list, and that's that Pickleball Apes hasn't quite decided what they're going to do about this break-in period yet. It appears this phenomenon could be remedied by creating a large overlap in the seams of the tubule, ensuring a full enclosure and preventing a seam rupture, but the hang-up is that it seems like the overwhelming majority of people that weigh in on this paddle do not want this to change or happen, and they want to keep that break-in as part of the paddles that they buy. So without knowing what Pickleball Apes is going to do on the future of this one of 2 things is going to happen. Either 1, they'll create a better wrapped, stronger tubule and will leave us with a very good control paddle. Or 2, the paddle construction will stay as is, and there will continue to be a break-in period until you reach that leveled, increased power. The problem with that is that I think there are still a lot of people who do not enjoy the patience required to wait it out until that paddle reaches a stable performance level. Either way, we'll be left with a standout paddle that I'll probably be reusing consistently for the foreseeable future, but not knowing the direction that the Pulse V is going to take does keep it down to the number 4 position on my list. Entering the top 3, we have the Spartus Olympus. This is a very unique 14mm Gen 3 paddle that, like the Pulse V, comes in at $180 after the use of discount codes. This is a super solid hybrid shaped paddle that I would personally put right on the border of all cord and power, depending on the person wielding it, and man does it have a good look. Instead of foam rings around the perimeter of the Olympus, Spartus has designed it to have a less expanding type of foam injected into each individual cell of the honeycomb core, giving it a nice full feel and a great sweet spot for a 14mm paddle. The foam-filled cells in the Olympus also give it great plow-through drive power, and I usually find myself recommending it to intermediate or advanced level players due to its strong pop, high drive speed, and ultra-high versatility. This is a paddle that can do just about everything really well, and is going to be a great choice for people who want something right on the border of all cord and power, but with most everything power related dialed up a couple notches compared to what most all-court paddles have. My overall number 2 paddle for 2024 is the Neonic Flare Prime X. Among other standout features that I'll get into, the Flare Prime X comes in at a price of $126 after the PBMED discount code, which is one of the best overall deals on this entire list and makes it the single least expensive wide body paddle when looking at the other industry best wide bodies for performance. Aside from the Pulse V, this is the other paddle that I've circled back to the most as a consistent go-to since its release. The Flare Prime X comes in the wide body shape. It's 14mm thick and has a nice plush feeling face that incorporates a fiberglass layer for pop. And for me, I seriously jive with the way that the faces of the Neonic paddles feel. I think they've really perfected the layering and the heating process through thermoforming. This paddle is my number 1 recommended paddle for people who want an ultra high level of maneuverability, as it has a maneuverability score right at the fastest quartile of paddles on the market. One thing that really helps its maneuverability is its narrow handle circumference, which is in stark contrast to the Paddletek ESQs and really helps to make you feel like you can manipulate this paddle pretty much wherever you want. Spin is strong, pop is on the higher end of all court levels, and control was actually really good with this paddle. I do think it needs a little bit of weight for increased stability and drive speed, considering it's such a light and maneuverable paddle, but after adding a little weight at the 3 and 9 o'clock positions of this paddle, it's a solid winner. Before mentioning my overall number 1 pick, I'll give a few honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is the 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐃 X Control Plus. This was probably the closest paddle to making the list, and really there isn't anything wrong with this paddle. It does most things pretty well, but it doesn't seem to stand out in any way, and I just couldn't see which paddle on this list it could bump off. My second honorable mention is the Grooven Laser 16X. I actually really love this paddle, but again, this list is not just for me. It's in a very similar boat to the 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐃 X Control Plus and does most things well, but has a bit more of a stiff feeling face that not everybody likes, and I just couldn't see which of the other paddles on this list it would bump off. My last honorable mention is the Neonic Flow and Neonic Flow Prime X, both of which are very similar paddles that are great for control and have a very nice feel to them. These are both still awesome overall value paddles, but there's just other paddles on this list that do either control or all court things better, and the shape of the flows seem to be hit or miss with how people feel about them. And that brings us to the overall number 1 best paddle of 2024, and that's the Honolulu J2K and J2TI. I know picking 2 paddles is cheating a little bit, but these 2 paddles are very similar with just a couple of differences, so separating them for this list just didn't make sense to me. First off, both of these paddles come in at killer prices, with the J2TI landing at $140 after the PBMED discount code, and the J2K coming in at $135 after the code PBMED-Kevlar. These paddles have a great feel, versatile play style, And the standout feature here really is extraordinarily high twist weights for paddles at the hybrid length, with some of the biggest sweet spots in the game. Both the J2K and J2TI are hybrid shaped Gen 2 thermoform paddles, with the main difference being the face composition, with the J2K being 100% Kevlar and the J2TI consisting of a polyester titanium carbon fiber weave. Both of these paddles have 16mm options with ultra high twist weights and correlated sweet spots, which are the result of extensive R&D that led Honolulu to the ideal shape and face dimensions for high twist weights and relatively low swing weights. You typically see this sort of thing on wide body paddles, but with the hybrid shape of these two, you get the benefit of some extra reach as well. Comparing the two, the 16mm J2K has a slightly crisper feel compared to the more plush feel of the J2TI, though I would say both feel on the plusher side overall. The J2TI has a slightly higher dwell time than the J2K, giving the feeling that the paddle absorbs and propels the ball a little more compared to the slightly more crisp feel of the 16mm J2K. The J2K does have a 14mm option, which is by far the most poppy and attack-oriented of the paddle bunch. For its given thickness, the 14mm J2K has a strong twist weight and feels the crispest of these three, and has the slightly more stiff feeling face overall, while also being the most maneuverable. All three of these paddles spin really well from multiple locations, and I have a hard time thinking of a player that wouldn't like these paddles, except perhaps for those who are looking for the extremes on either end of the power or control spectrums. If you want the plushest paddle of these three, with the sensation of a higher dwell time and ball recoil, I'd recommend the 16mm J2TI, which also has a nice sparkle from the titanium colored fibers. If you want a slightly crisper feel in the J2TI, but still want a plush feeling paddle overall, I'd go with the 16mm J2K. And if you want the most attack-oriented, offensive-capable version of these three paddles with the crispest pop and the highest maneuverability, then I would recommend the 14mm J2K. And there you have it. That's my list of the top 10 paddles of 2024, which I believe are the best of the best paddles out there. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for watching.